Jane Hume. Jane, there is a fair amount of criticism, even though it's not in Anthony Albanese's hands or the federal government's hands. There is a fair amount of criticism directed at Anthony Albanese for not being strong enough, for want of a better term, on this issue. What do you think?
Well, these protests are clearly aimed at persecuting an already threatened minority in Australia, the Jewish community, which, let's face it, is now Australia's most persecuted, most threatened minority, and that is unacceptable. Now, do not get me wrong. Freedom of speech and freedom to protest is really important, but to protest peacefully is profoundly important here. What I would hope is that these protesters are using their voices to focus on Hamas, because now the peace process is in the hands of Hamas. Are these protesters saying, Hamas, it's time to lay down your weapons, it's time to return the hostages, it's time to bring peace to the Middle East, sign up to the peace plan that is being offered, because that is the very best pathway to a potential two-state solution. It is potentially the only pathway to a two-state solution. If these protesters aren't protesting for that, if they aren't using their voice to direct Hamas to lay down their weapons and return the hostages and sign up to the peace plan, I don't think the protesters really wanted peace in the Middle East in the first place.
Yeah, they're not protesting against Hamas or urging Hamas to sign up to the peace plan. It's the opposite of that. It does beg the question, as you posed it, Jane, what do they want and why do it at a time where I think it's particularly hurtful and particularly counterproductive, given what's happening in Egypt right now and how badly the Jewish diaspora would be hurting too.
They must be hurting. I know that in Victoria, the signs that we saw up yesterday in Fitzroy were profoundly offensive. Let's be very clear. Support for Hamas is support for a terrorist organisation. This is not free speech. That's a crime, and it should be treated as such.
Yeah. Is it being treated as such? Do you think it's being treated with the gravity it deserves?
Well, I do think that the Prime Minister should come out and be far more forceful in his messaging on this. That support for Hamas, if that's what we're seeing in the streets, support for Hamas, not a two-state solution, which is potentially on offer if Hamas sign up to a peace deal, but support for Hamas is a crime. This is a terrorist organisation, a listed terrorist organisation. I would hope that the protesters use this time, if they must protest, they use this time to support the peace deal that is on offer.
OK, we'll see. We'll see where it happens today. As I say, it is back in court. I want to ask you now about some of the coalition's policy. There seems to be ad hoc policy coming out at the moment, but there seems to be some general agreement that now that you need to reclaim the mantle of lower taxes.
I think that Ted O'Brien's been really clear on this. He spoke in the party room yesterday. He's written in the media today about how important it is to get the budget back under control, that we can deliver as a coalition a better budget bottom line, lower debt and lower taxes. That should be what the coalition is focusing on, and I 100% agree with him. Unless we can wind back Labor's out-of-control spending, and it is out of control, well, then we are going to essentially leave a worse legacy, a future without prosperity and opportunity for the next generation. Do you know, Labor's spending is now 5.5 times higher than it's 5.5 times. Labor's spending grew by 5.5% in the last 12 months. So that's 4 times higher than economic growth. This is the extent to which Labor's spending is out of control. No wonder the RBA is now hesitant to continue to lower rates, because that level of government spending continues to put pressure on inflation. We already saw some surprise inflation figures come out last week. The inflation dragon has not yet been tamed. No wonder the RBA is so hesitant. This is really in Labor's hands now, but they continue to spend and they continue to spin. They've said that they've delivered a better budget bottom line. Oh, for goodness sakes. They've moved from a $16 billion surplus to a $10 billion deficit. That's a $26 billion turnaround. You can't spin your way out of that.
Was it a mistake to oppose Labor's tax cuts?
Well, Laura, if I had have had my way, we would have delivered better tax cuts at the last election. That's certainly something we'd been working on. It wasn't something that the leadership at that stage had an appetite for. The good news is the message that we're hearing from leadership in Coalition now is that they do have an appetite to deliver lower taxes as well as a better budget bottom line. Do not believe Labor's spin. They said that we have delivered a worse budget bottom line. That is not at all true. In fact, at the last election, we were committed to a $14 billion improvement in the budget bottom line over 4 years and a $40 billion reduction in debt. Anything else is simply Labor lies.
OK, so you just said you had planned tax cuts before the next election, bigger tax cuts than Labor. What happened to those?
Well, I think you saw from our narrative in the lead up to the election that we were committed to delivering lower taxes, lower and simpler and fairer taxes.
That's right.
By the time we got to the election, there seemed to be less appetite from leadership, but that doesn't mean that this is not something that should be fundamental to the coalition. I can't explain that to you, Laura, and I think you have to probably ask the leadership at the time. But I can tell you that the coalition is always committed to lower and simpler and fairer taxes, should always be committed to lower and simpler and fairer taxes. That is exactly the message you're hearing from the leadership of Susan Lee, with Ted O'Brien as the Treasurer.
But Jane, it was a massive gamble for you to not match Labor. You're telling us here this morning that you had planned to go even further so you could be the party of lower taxes no matter what Labor did, but you didn't do that. You went to the election allowing Labor to be able to say that they were the party of lower taxes. Can you tell us what you had in mind at the time?
Well, let's face it, Laura. I mean, anything that Labor had delivered was on the back of bracket creep. On the back of bracket creep, that was the hard-working earnings of ordinary Australians that had gone to higher and higher taxes that were delivering to the higher spending of Labor's agenda. Stopping bracket creep, putting at least a down payment on ending bracket creep should have been our highest priority at the end of that, when we went to the election. We failed to do that, but I think now you're hearing that message from Susan Lee and from Ted O'Brien that there is a commitment to delivering lower taxes as well as a better budget bottom line and lowering debt. That's fundamentally important. This should be the core agenda of any coalition government.
Yeah, it should have been. But now you've kind of got to scrap around and scrape to remind people that historically you have been the party of lower taxes. What was the thinking at the time? Was it that you reinstate stage 3 tax cuts but also maintain what Labor had put in place and find a way to pay for it?
Well, I won't go into every permutation and combinations that the Shadow Treasurer and I had worked on, but can I assure you that there had been many permutations and combinations that had been worked up that would deliver a better budget bottom line as well as lower tax cuts and would deliver that future prosperity for all Australians. And that message we're seeing from the leadership now is very clear. What we need to do now is wind back Labor's spending but make sure that we grow the pie. We can deliver lower and simpler, fairer taxes. We can deliver a better budget bottom line and we can deliver lower debt. It just takes fiscal discipline and fiscal management. That's the message that you're hearing now from the coalition leadership. That's what we'll be taking to the next election.
Who's the leader to do that? Susan or Andrew?
Of course, Susan. Susan is the leader. This is where the message is coming from. It's coming from the top. It's coming from the Deputy Leader and the Shadow Treasurer and Ted O'Brien. This is really important. And I think it's something that Liberals and indeed the entire coalition can rally around. This is something that is so deep within our DNA. Lower and simpler, fairer taxes, a better budget bottom line, lower debt and prosperity and opportunity for all Australians. That's what we should be working on. Winding back that growing out-of-control expenditure, 5.5% in a year, 4 times faster than the economy. That is unsustainable and unacceptable. That's what Ted O'Brien's working on. That's what Liberals should be getting behind.
With Andrew Hastie on the backbench, what's that done to the party itself? Has it shaken a bit of confidence within the party about the direction? Has it, moved any timelines for concrete policy? Give us some insight, Jane, if you will.
Do you know, Andrew is a much loved and much respected colleague. He's a great contributor to the team, but you can contribute to the team from the front bench or the back bench. We now have these policy development committees, these coalition policy committees that have been working on genuine policy reforms, genuine policy ideas that gather the best and the brightest from right around the coalition, so that we can develop the policies that are going to appeal to mainstream Australians going into the next election.
Do you wonder why,
really
Jane?
Important. It's an opportunity for a reset.
Yeah, you say there's, policies being formulated right now, as it should be doing after the loss you've had, and this is what you do in opposition. You formulate that policy, you come together as a team and prosecute it. My question now to Andrew, about Andrew Hastie and to Andrew Hastie is, why deal yourself out of formulating that policy with inside the tent now? Why wouldn't he have just stayed there to help push that, especially when it comes to his portfolio area? Yeah.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Andrew Hastie. No. He's made decisions that have been very personal to him. But I can tell you that, for instance, in the position that I'm in, I've been developing policy around superannuation, allowing couples to split their superannuation balances evenly between them to tackle the gender super gap. This is work that has been done already. It's been presented to our coalition policy committees. I've been, getting a sense of the appetite to pursue it. This is good work that can be done.
Well, you're proving my point,
from
Jane.
The front bench,
all the policy work, all the power on the back bench.
No, we've got power, talent, intellect and appetite right around the coalition, you'll be pleased to know, Laura, and everybody is putting their shoulders to the wheel. We're a depleted number, there is no doubt about that, but we're certainly not short of talent, and we're not short of enthusiasm and good ideas. So now's the time to lower the shoulder and get on with the job. We have 2 years to get our policy agenda in order. And in the meantime, we need to make sure that we're listening to ordinary Australians, mainstream Australians, finding out what's important to them and making sure that we deliver an agenda that appeals to them.
Jane Hume, thank you. See you soon.
That's a pleasure, Laura.
Well, after a